All right. Well, so grateful for you guys being here tonight. As Keely and I were preparing for this event and praying for this over multiple weeks, just asking God that He would bring the people that He wanted to be here, and just so grateful for you guys being here tonight. So what I'd like to do is to take a few minutes and to share with you about the vision we have for Living Stones Lodge, and kind of a little bit of where it came from, how it came to be, and what we plan to do with the ministry. It did dawn on me and occur to me that really what we're asking you to be a part of in those three ways that Joshua just mentioned, really we're asking you to be a part of something that hasn't actually started yet. And so when I think about how many of you that have been here tonight, shown up tonight to be a part of this, it was something that hasn't even begun yet. We're just very grateful for that. So I want to share with you the vision and where we're going to be going. So to start off with, I want to talk about our mission statement. So our mission statement, it's simple, right? It's to help young men find their identity and purpose in Jesus Christ through close proximity discipleship. And I'll talk a little bit about what we mean by close proximity discipleship here in just a moment. But really that's what we want to do, is we want to help young men find their identity and purpose. You think about, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, what is my identity and purpose? Because we all have one, or think we have one, but maybe you haven't given it a lot of thought. But I guarantee you there's a lot of young men that are missing it. They don't know who they are, and they don't know why they're even here on this planet. And so our mission statement is to help them find their identity and purpose through Jesus Christ. So the next thing, we'll talk about our name. So why did we pick the name Living Stones Lodge? So 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 and 5 says, "As you come to him, a living stone, rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ." So really that's what we hope to have happen with these young men, is that they would come to faith in Christ if they're not believers already, and that they would recognize that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They are a stone, a living stone, part of the spiritual house that Jesus Christ is building, that He is the cornerstone of. And so that's what we hope to do through it, and that's why we picked the name. All right, so close proximity discipleship. I don't know if I coined that phrase or if I picked it up somewhere along the way, but really what we mean by it is that close proximity discipleship means, how do we imitate somebody who's further along the path than we are? Because really that's what discipleship is supposed to be. Put some scriptures up here, and in each one of them we can see that Paul talks about a similar thing. He's saying, imitate me as I imitate Christ. He's talking about the things that you have seen, learned and received and heard and saw in me. These things do, right? So you think about in Christianity, if we're supposed to, as a believer, imitate the Christian life of somebody who's further along the path than we are, how do we get a chance to do that? A lot of times in modern Christianity, those times are very few and far between. Maybe you have the privilege of meeting with somebody for coffee once a week, which is great. There's absolutely value in that, right? But what if we could give young men not just glimpses of a Christian life that they're supposed to imitate now and again, but if we could give them an extended period, 8 months, of being around other men and women who are further along the path than they are in their Christian walk, whose lives they could imitate. So not just telling them about what the Christian life's supposed to be like, but showing them, modeling it for them, right, in a way that they can imitate. If you think about kids, those of you that have kids, whether they're young or old, you can definitely relate to this, right? You think about, how does a child learn to use a fork? Well, most of the time you don't call them in one day and say, "Hey, welcome, we're going to have fork classes today. We're so glad you came." How do they learn? It's by watching their siblings, watching their parents, and then one day they pick up the plastic fork and they start stabbing things, right? Because they're imitating what they've seen. And that's really what the Christian life is supposed to be as well. But a lot of times we just don't have the close proximity that we need. All right. So, Narrow Gate Lodge, Joshua mentioned it earlier, but this is a ministry that's been going for 20 years in Tennessee. They're a little bit outside of Franklin, Tennessee, and they've been doing what we hope to do with Livingstone's Lodge. They've been doing it for 20 years. It was about 15 years ago when my wife and I were missionaries in El Salvador that I first was exposed to the ministry of Narrow Gate Lodge. Somehow I got on their email list. I can't even remember how. Somebody told me about them, or I found them on Facebook, but somehow I got on their email list, and I started getting these emails that are telling me about them doing close proximity discipleship with these young men. And I remember at that time just being really impacted by it and thinking, wow, what would it look like to do something like that here in El Salvador where we were as missionaries? But it just wasn't the right time yet. And so now fast forward, here we are in the States, and God has brought it back around. But we're so grateful to have a ministry model that not is just just getting started, but they've been doing it for 20 years. In 20 years, you learn a lot of things. You try a lot of things that work, things that don't work. And so you end up, after 20 years, with a pretty well-refined model. And Narrow Gate has been so generous to share that model with us. We met with them. They said, yeah, any of our materials, the things we've learned, we're happy to share those things with you guys. So we're grateful to have a good ministry model to start with. All right, so who are we targeting? We're looking at, targeting sounds bad. Who are we aiming this at? Who are we trying to reach? Yeah, we're not shooting them, right? We're ministering to them. But it's 18 to 25-year-old men. And we chose this range for a reason. That starts at 18 very intentionally. We want them to be adults, at least legally adults. They can vote for a president. They can join the military. They can make a decision to be a part of this ministry or not, right? So we're intentionally not starting with minors. The upper age limit is a little bit more flexible, just as we were able to have guys apply. So why would they do this, or who is it for? So it's for believers and non-believers. Narrow Gate, for example, has lots of guys who have come through who were not believers when they started and ended up putting their faith in Jesus Christ to save them through their experience there. It's from good homes and broken homes, high school graduates or high school dropouts, all the way through college graduates, everything in between, troubled pasts and good kids. A question we get a lot is, are you going to deal with active substance abuse? And the answer is no. We won't be set up for that. But if somebody was able to go to like a treatment center, get sober, then they could absolutely come and be a part of Livingstone's Lodge. So why would they participate? Lack of purpose or direction, failure to launch, empty from bad decisions, or disillusioned with what they thought was important, and then finding that it wasn't actually important as they thought. As we've talked about this ministry with a lot of people, and maybe you're sitting here tonight and you're thinking, oh, I have multiple guys that come to mind that would fit this criteria. And that's definitely been our experience as we've talked to people, that there's no shortage of men that come to mind that would maybe be good candidates for this. Or I've talked to a lot of guys who are maybe older now. Maybe they're in their 40s or 50s and they say, man, I wish I had had something like this that I could have been a part of when I was 18. So I think it's definitely a common need, as Joshua mentioned, in our society today for young men to find their purpose and identity. All right, so we want them to answer 2 questions while they're there. And really, it's a chance to put life on pause. Can you imagine doing that right now? If you could just put your life on pause for 8 months, you don't have to worry about bills, you don't have to cut the grass, you don't have to do anything. You just have to answer 2 questions. Would you take that opportunity? It'd be a great opportunity, right? Well, that's the opportunity we want to offer these young men, for them to be able to answer these 2 questions. Who am I? And hopefully the answer they come away with is, I'm a son of God, right? And then, why am I here? Why am I on this planet? And really for them to have their purpose be rooted in Jesus Christ, that their life, whatever they end up doing, wherever they end up working, their life is to glorify Jesus Christ with their life. So that's what we want them to do during their 8 months. All right, so we've got an application process. Narrow Gate has generously shared this with us as well. When they started out, they just kind of let anybody in. You know, if anybody wanted to be a part of it, they could. But they found out over the years that they had guys with certain characteristics that would almost always make it through and do well. And then they had other guys with other characteristics that almost never did well. And so they kind of refined their application process to be looking for certain qualities, certain characteristics in these guys. And so we've mentioned a few of them here. Desire to change. You know, if you don't want to change, It's going to be hard to be in an 8-month thing where everybody's wanting to help you change, right? An openness to faith. So don't necessarily have to be a believer in Jesus Christ yet, but definitely need to not be aggressively atheist. We're going to talk about the Bible. We're going to talk about Jesus. So if they're not okay with that, then it's not going to be a good fit. Receptivity to feedback. Learning orientation, the ability to apply past experiences to future decisions, some discipline and tenacity, and then lastly, authenticity. So those are some of the qualities that we'll use for the interview process as we have these young men apply to be a part of Livingstone's Lodge. All right, so it's broken up into 3 phases. There are 8 months there, and I'll talk about the 3 phases in detail here in just a minute. But if you notice, in the last section there, we're going to start these guys in classes together. So they won't start an individual. They'll start in a class of other guys, 3 to 8, with maybe 6 guys kind of being the sweet spot. And they're going to start in a new class every other month. So in a typical year, then we would have 6 classes of guys that would start every other month. And then they'll move through the different phases together within their class. They end up building really strong friendships. We've met some of these guys from Narrowgate that have done this, and they keep in touch with each other for a long, long time. Those bonds that are formed are really strong within their class and with the other guys there, but definitely within their class, really strong bonds. All right, so the first phase that we'll look at, actually, here's a diagram. So this is I wish I could show you an actual property that we're ready to move into. We're not quite there yet. We're still praying, still looking, actively checking out properties and asking God to provide the right one. So if you could join us in praying for that, we'd definitely be appreciative of that. But this is just an example of what a property might look like. So you see over here on the right-hand side, we've got the phase 1, which is the camping area, and where they're camping out in the woods. I'll talk about that here in just a second. Phase 2 would be kind of a bunkhouse, where they're going to be together not only with their class, but some of the other classes ahead or behind them. And then finally, they'll finish out with the phase 3 in the lodge house, which is going to be more like a house with bedrooms and things like that. The lodge house is where Keely and I would also be living. Part of that close proximity model is that Keely and I would be living there with the guys and being able to be in close proximity with them and having conversations and just all those things that would naturally happen when you're together with somebody. Okay, so phase 1, we call it Foundation. It's 35 days long, and they are camping in tents in the woods for 35 days. And for some of you, you're probably thinking, that sounds like a dream come true. I love camping. I love being time in the woods. Others of you are thinking, you have got to be kidding me. How could you possibly survive for 35 days in the woods? But I will tell you, this is very intentional. And Narrowgate even told us, they said, we tried to do away with this, and then we brought it back because we realized it really helps strip away a lot of those things that the young men come in thinking is so important. And it allows them to really get down to just the basics of life. They've got a shelter to sleep in, they've got a warm sleeping bag, they've got food to eat, but they are roughing it, right? They are cooking their own meals over the fire and with a camp stove. So it is really learning a lot of outdoor skills, which builds confidence. So there's a lot of benefit from this first phase, kind of stripping away all those things that they think are important. One of the things they're going to do during this phase is study the book of John. So if those of you who are familiar with the book of John, it's all about Jesus, who he is, the miracles that he did, the gospel. And so that book of John, for those who are believers, is going to really give them a good idea of who Jesus is and what it means to really be a disciple. Not just say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, but to really be a follower of Jesus. For those who are not believers, they're going to be challenged with the gospel. They're going to get a chance to really see who Jesus is throughout the book of John. And then at the end of their time in this first phase, be challenged to make a decision. That what am I going to do with Jesus? And that's what happens at the end of this first phase. So those who decide, yes, I want to be a follower of Jesus, whether they were a believer or not before, would then move on to phase 2. So phase 2, it's called community. So phase 2 is 4 months long, so significantly longer. In this phase, they're going to be moving into the bunkhouse. There's a lot more community. There's a lot more living together. We've got multiple classes of guys that are all together in one place. And you can imagine there's friction. But that also is by design. helping them to learn how to resolve conflicts and to work through things and to forgive each other and to have crucial conversations where they can say, hey, I'm upset with you because of something you did and I want to work it out. So this is an opportunity to do that. They're going to learn a lot of practical things, cooking, cleaning, how to do laundry, how to change the oil in a car, how to use tools, a lot of those things that a lot of young men these days don't end up learning. And finally, they're going to do Bible studies, going through a bunch of different books of the Bible together. One of the things that they're going to be doing is they call it the study of Philemon. And a big effort is to connect what they're learning in Scripture with the things that they end up doing with their hands. And so an example of that is called the Philemon box. And so they'll go through the book of Philemon, short book, right? But it's all about the restoration of relationship. Paul is talking to Philemon and saying, hey, you need to make up and restore the relationship between you and Onesimus, your runaway slave. And so this book talks about restoring relationships. So that's what the guys are challenged to do then. So they go into the wood shop. They are doing some wood turning on a lathe, and you can actually make a wooden pin, right? You put all the pin parts in there, make a pin. Then they're going to write out a handwritten copy of Philemon. And then while they're doing that, they're going to be thinking about and praying about who's somebody that I need to restore my relationship with. It could be a parent, it could be a sibling, maybe a coach or a neighbor or a friend, but it's somebody they need to restore their relationship with. So then they take the same pen and write out a letter to that person, asking them to forgive them, asking them to restore the relationship. Then in the wood shop, they're making a wooden box, kind of an ornate wooden box. They take the pen, the copy of Philemon, the copy of the letter, they pack it into the box, and then they ship it off to the person. And guys, I heard countless stories at Narrowgate of restored relationships. And so it's a great example of what we're trying to do with connecting what they're learning in Scripture, and not just have it be head knowledge, but to really put it into practice and have them actually walk it out and live it out in life. So that's going to be phase 2, community. And then we go into phase 3. Phase 3 is service. And at this point, they're going to move into the house where it's going to be more like they're going to have a bedroom. It's a little bit more like real life because you're preparing, and after the end of this phase, to transition back into real life. So we're preparing them for that. They're going to be doing some learning about spiritual gifts. What are my spiritual gifts? Learning sound financial practices. How to date a woman in a God-honoring way. Young men definitely need that, right? Just learning about the importance of an involvement in a local church. So when they leave Livingstone's Lodge and they go back to wherever home is, whether that's in the Kansas City area or somewhere else in the United States or Canada or wherever it is. I mean, we could have guys come from wherever. But whenever they go home, we want them to be well prepared to re-enter the reality of life. So we'll talk a lot about temptation, a lot about what to do when you're no longer on this kind of isolated island of Livingstone's Lodge, and now all of a sudden you have all these things available to you again. How do you handle that in a way that honors Jesus Christ? So we'll talk about those things in the third phase. It's 3 months long, and that's the final stretch of their time there. And then to finish it off, there's a graduation. And the graduation ceremony is going to be really incredible. I wish I had a video to show you of our own graduation ceremonies. Next year, when we gather together to do this, we'll have stories of Livingstone's Lodge. For the time being, though, you can definitely go onto Narrowgate's website or their YouTube channel. If you want to cry, I would encourage you to watch one of the graduations. It's very moving. Incredible to watch these guys come up. Incredible to watch their dads come and be a part of it, because that's one of the parts of the graduation, is a father or father figure will give a blessing to the graduate. The graduate kneels down on his knees. The dad comes up and puts his hand on his head and speaks a blessing over him. That has also been responsible for many restored relationships between father and son. So really cool. One of the things they're going to do is they're going to choose a mentor. So a previous graduate, I'm not sure yet what we're going to do with our first guys that go through, because there's no previous graduates yet. We'll have to figure that out. But they're going to choose a previous graduate to be their sponsor. So they will be part of the graduation ceremony, and then that guy is going to mentor them and disciple them over the course of the next year. So as they leave Livingstone's Lodge, they go back to wherever home is. This other graduate is going to keep in touch with them and text them and call them and help them navigate the temptations and different things they're going to encounter when they get home. They get an engraved sword presentation, which is really cool. And then really it's a time to declare manhood. Maybe the government would consider them men already because of their age and what it says on their driver's license. But a lot of these guys don't necessarily consider themselves men when they come in. But by the time they go through and they graduate, we are declaring and expecting manhood, right? For them to act like men who can honor Jesus Christ through the way that they live and honor him. All right, ripple effect. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what would happen to a young man? He's 18 to 20, 25, and all of a sudden, the course of his life gets changed because he figures out who he is and why he's here. And the ripple effect that then has, then the spouse that he chooses. What a difference, right? The kids that he has and the father that he would be, and even just interaction with family. The occupation that he goes into, whether he starts a company or works for a company or goes to college. And then finally with the local church participation. We're excited to think about how the local churches, Grace Church and others in the area, will be positively impacted by an influx of young men who know who they are in Jesus Christ and are wanting to serve him and honor him throughout their lives. I am excited to see what that will do to local churches. All right. Why this slide, right? How did that get in there? No. So I heard an illustration years ago, and it talked about that sometimes God will give you an idea or a dream that he wants you to accomplish. And he described it being like a chicken egg. So not like you get in the Hy-Vee or grocery store, but like a fertilized chicken egg that can actually become a chick, right? So this dream or vision that God gives you, you have to incubate it, has to be kept at the right temperature, neither too hot nor too cold. You have to protect it. If something comes in and cracks it, you lose all your potential. You have to wait. You can't be impatient and say, I want a chicken right now. Well, that's not the way it works. You have to wait until it's ready to hatch. And so Keely and I feel like this has been a chicken egg, so to speak, that we've been carrying around for about 15 years. And there's been a few times when we thought, oh, maybe this is the right time. And then God said, no, it's not the right time. Just keep incubating the egg, keep protecting it, keep being patient, and then I'll show you the right time. And so in 2023, about January, God nudged me. How does that work? I don't know, but it's clear, right? When God nudges you and says, hey, I want you to do this. And he nudged me to talk to Keely and go out and visit Narrowgate in Tennessee. We don't have any family that way. All our family's out west. So we usually go west. We don't go east. But we went east. We went to Narrowgate and we visited. And in a good way, it wrecked us. Kind of the you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube kind of thing, right? Where once you see discipleship happening in this close proximity way, it was difficult to come back to Overland Park, back to Kansas City and say, I'm just going to meet with guys once a week for coffee for an hour. Again, there's absolutely value in that. But when you see something that goes beyond that, when you see something that has the potential to impact young men in an incredible way, it was hard to let that go. And we couldn't let it go. God didn't let us let it go. Kept it on our hearts. We prayed about it. And that's when God said, hey, I want you to take the model that they're offering and that they have refined over these 20 years, and I want you to start one like it here in the Kansas City area. And so the egg is, I don't know if it's hatched or trembling, but it's definitely close. And I'm so excited that you guys are being a part of this hatching, this part of this dream, this vision that we've been carrying around for a long time, to be able to see it actually coming to be. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being a part of it. I'll close with this. We've got a passage in Joshua chapter 3 that's probably one of Keely and I's favorite passages. If you're not familiar with it, it's the story where the nation of Israel, as Moses is passed on, and now Joshua is leading the nation of Israel. And they come to the River Jordan. And it's hard enough to cross a river with 3 million people, but this is during flood stage. So it's the worst possible time to try to cross this river. But God tells Joshua, I want you to cross the river. He says, line everybody up. 3 million people. How do you make a line of 3 million people? I'm not even sure what that would look like. You do like 10 across, 50 across, but he lines them all up. And he says, I want you to put the priests with the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God, up at the front. And when the soles of the feet of the priests touch the water, then I'll make a way for you to go across. Now, if you're like me, you read this story and you're like, wouldn't it have been easier if God, like in the morning, parted the river, like stopped the water, showed the dry ground, then everybody lines up, then everybody goes across on dry ground? Well, yeah, sure, that would definitely be easier. But that wouldn't give God the glory, would it? That wouldn't require the same faith to say, I'm lining up and I'm stepping in, even though I don't know how it's going to happen. And so for Keely and I, over the course of our lives, and definitely for this project, this Living Stones Lodge, we have lined up and we are stepping in obedience. And there's a lot of question marks still. I wish I could say, man, every question has a period now. But it doesn't yet. There still are questions. But God is parting the waters. He's already doing that. You guys being here tonight is part of God parting the waters of the river and making a way for us to go across on dry land and to have this chicken egg hatch into a ministry that's going to impact a lot of young men. So thank you again for being here. It's so great to see faces I know and faces I don't know. If I haven't met you yet, please don't leave without introducing yourself. We'd love to meet you.